So why would anybody ever say that a universal has its own independent being, to use Russell's terminology here? That is, why would anybody ever think that what seems like a pure idea would have an existence that is independent of our thinking of it? Again, Russell refers to his criticism of Berkeley in this chapter and says that just because something is called an idea doesn't mean that it's mental. Right now, he says, I can think of the concept of whiteness. But what is in my mind is not whiteness. It's a thought about whiteness. Whiteness being the object of my thought, and my thought being a subjective process inside my mind, or to be metaphorical about it, sort of like the difference between sensation and sense data that he introduces earlier. Why would anybody ever think, though, that purely conceptual things could have an independent existence? Well, he gives a very interesting example in this chapter, The World of Universals, in which he mentions a proposition. He says, consider such a proposition as, quote, Edinburgh, city of Edinburgh, is north of London, city of London. And what he says is that proposition, Edinburgh is north of London, first of all, it's true. And secondly, I'm going to ignore that phone call. Secondly, the truth of the proposition is not dependent on us in any way. That is, Edinburgh would be north of London if we didn't know about it. If all human beings ceased to exist, it would still be true, as long as the two cities still stood, that Edinburgh is north of London. So we say that is a truth that's independent of us, that is a truth we discover rather than somehow something that's dependent upon us for its truth. But then we start looking at this proposition itself, start breaking it down, analyzing it. It consists of proper names, Edinburgh, which attaches to a certain place, name of a place, London, which also is a place, proper name of a place. But then we have this expression, or this term, is north of, or north of. Now Russell says that's a relation. That is, it's a way of expressing a relation between these two particular things. And as a relation, it can apply to any number of things. For instance, that Chicago is north of Atlanta. Canada is north of the United States. At least most of it, I think. Canada is north of Mexico. That is, it's a universal. Okay, so we've said that the truth, Edinburgh is north of London, is independent of us. It does not depend upon us for its truth. But an essential part of that truth is the universal north of. So what that would imply, Russell says, is that universal north of is also independent of us and independent of our thinking. That is, it's something that has being apart from us and that we can think of. He says, we may therefore now assume it to be true that nothing mental is presupposed in the fact that Edinburgh is north of London, but this fact involves the relation north of, which is a universal. And it would be impossible for the whole fact to involve nothing mental if the relation north of, which is a constituent part of the fact, did involve anything mental. Hence, we must admit that the relation north of, like the terms it relates, is not dependent upon thought, but belongs to the independent world which thought apprehends, but does not create. So it's kind of like Russell's many proof that a universal, in this case the universal relation north of, can't be something that depends entirely upon us for its existence, for its being. It must have a being independent. And Russell's idea, which he expands on later, but he's already mentioned it, is that these universals are things that we are acquainted with. Similar to our acquaintance with sense data, we just come to know them directly. Not by using our senses, not by paying attention to what we see or hear or touch, like with sense data. We come to know them by using our minds. This is straight Plato, man. This is really, Platonic stuff, and at least at this point in his thinking, I guess, Russell was a kind of a Platonist. So they were, the question, okay, what about that? How do we know universals and if they exist, what kind of knowledge can we have of them?